The welding sparks died out as Kenny Moore pulled off his mask and stared at his trembling hands. The hospital bill crumpled in his fist told a story he couldn't bear to read again. His son, little Tommy, needed heart surgery, an impossible dream for a man whose every penny vanished before the week ended. The world had turned gray around him, until one strange evening when a man in a black suit arrived at his rusted trailer door with a proposal that sounded less like mercy and more like a cruel twist of fate. Before we dive into this deeply moving story of love, redemption, and miracles, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of love to heal what even medicine cannot. The stranger's name was Victor Hale, the legal executor of the Reed estate, one of the wealthiest families in the city. He spoke with precision, his every word cutting through the quiet air like glass. "Mr. Moore, we're prepared to offer you $200,000 and full medical coverage for your son's surgery. All you have to do is marry Miss Charlotte Reed for 1 year." Kenny laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. Marry a stranger? For money. But when Victor slid a photo across the table, Kenny stopped breathing for a moment. The woman in the picture was beautiful, yet heartbreakingly fragile. Her pale hands resting on the arms of a wheelchair, her eyes distant, almost empty. Charlotte Reed had once been the bright star of society, known for her radiant smile and boundless compassion. But a devastating car accident 3 years ago had left her paralyzed from the waist down and silent ever since. Rumors whispered that she'd lost the will to live, and her powerful father wanted to protect her image and their family's legacy from cruel gossip. A marriage, even a fabricated one, would do just that. Kenny signed the contract that night, his heart heavy with guilt and desperation. It wasn't love that led him to the altar. It was the faint, flickering hope that his son might live to see another Christmas. The first time Kenny saw Charlotte in person, she was sitting by the window of her mansion's sunlit drawing room. The soft golden light poured over her like a gentle prayer. Her blonde hair was tied into a perfect bun, her skin pale but flawless, her lips slightly parted as if on the verge of remembering a forgotten word. Her eyes, though open, seemed to look past everything, past him, past the world, straight into some silent sorrow no one else could reach. Kenny knelt down beside her wheelchair, unsure what to say to a woman who could not respond. "I'm Kenny," he whispered. "I guess I'm your husband now." Days turned into weeks, and silence became the third person in their strange marriage. Kenny slept in the guest room, spending his days tending to the estate's neglected garden and sending updates to Tommy's doctors. Every evening, he read aloud to Charlotte, stories about courage, about people who had lost everything yet found meaning again. He didn't know if she understood, but sometimes, when the sun dipped below the horizon and the room glowed amber, he thought he saw her fingers twitch ever so slightly. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning her room, Kenny found an old music box on her bedside table. When he wound it, a hauntingly beautiful tune filled the air. To his shock, Charlotte's eyes glistened, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. For the first time, Kenny saw life flicker within her. He reached for her hand, whispering, "You remember this, don't you?" Her lips trembled, but no sound came. That moment changed everything. Kenny began to learn about Charlotte, not through words, but through small gestures, patterns, and expressions. He learned that she loved morning sunlight, the smell of fresh coffee, and the sound of rain tapping against glass. He spoke to her every day, telling her about Tommy's progress, his late wife's laughter, and his own fears. Slowly, something began to shift. Her once empty eyes started to follow him. Her face softened when he smiled. The silence between them began to feel less like a void and more like an unspoken conversation. But the world outside their mansion walls wasn't kind. Whispers spread that Kenny was using the poor heiress for money. Reporters lurked at the gates, flashing cameras whenever he stepped out. Even Victor, the cold executor, warned him not to get emotionally involved. Yet, every night, when Kenny looked at Charlotte, he saw more than a contract. He saw a woman trapped in her own body, fighting to return to the world she had once loved. Then came the day of Tommy's surgery. Kenny rushed to the hospital at dawn, trembling with both hope and terror. Hours passed before the doctor finally came out, smiling faintly. "He's going to make it." Kenny broke down in tears, whispering prayers of gratitude. But when he returned home that evening, exhausted yet joyful, he found Charlotte in her room, her head tilted slightly, her breathing shallow. Panic surged through him as he called for help. The doctors came, examined her, and said softly, "Her condition is deteriorating. There's nothing more we can do." Kenny refused to believe it. That night, he sat by her bedside, holding her cold hand in his. "Don't leave me now, Charlotte. You gave me hope when I'd forgotten what it was. You saved my son's life. You saved mine. Please fight." For the first time in months, her eyes blinked, and he saw a faint tear slip down her cheek. Days later, as spring sunlight filtered through the curtains, Kenny decided to take her to the garden, the one he'd rebuilt with his own hands. He wheeled her chair among the blooming roses, their fragrance rich and sweet in the air. He leaned down and whispered, "Charlotte, if you can hear me, this world still needs you. I still need you." He pressed his lips softly against hers, a kiss filled with every ounce of gratitude, sorrow, and love he'd never dared to speak. And then, something miraculous happened. Her fingers trembled, her lips moved, and a whisper, fragile as wind, escaped her throat. "Kenny." He froze, eyes wide in disbelief. She spoke again, her voice breaking. "I can feel you." Slowly, painfully, her legs shifted beneath the folds of her red dress. Kenny's heart pounded as she tried, trembling, to move again. "You're standing," he gasped. Tears streamed down both their faces as she took her first unsteady breath of freedom, her hand gripping his like a lifeline. The doctors called it impossible, a spontaneous neurological recovery. But Kenny knew the truth. It wasn't science. It wasn't luck. It was love. The same love that had healed his son's heart had now awakened hers. Weeks later, Charlotte began physical therapy, relearning how to walk, speak, and live again. Every step she took, Kenny was there, steadying her, believing in her. The contract that had once bound them in obligation was torn apart by something far stronger. The bond of two souls who had found light in the darkest of places. When Tommy finally met Charlotte, he wrapped his tiny arms around her and whispered, "Are you my mom now?" Charlotte knelt down, her first time on her knees since the accident, and hugged him tight. "If you'll have me," she said, smiling through tears. Kenny watched, his heart full, knowing that life had given him more than a miracle. It had given him a family. Months later, as they walked hand in hand through that same garden, Charlotte paused under the blooming roses. "You know," she said softly, "the first time you kissed me, I didn't just feel your lips. I felt hope again." Kenny smiled, pulling her close. "And now," she looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Now I feel alive." If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bright Hearts, because love, in its purest form, truly heals what pain once broke.